Thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Diane Alfaro, Events Co-Chair of the Democratic Central Committee, and I will be moderating tonight's Town Hall with District 3 Supervisor candidate Justin Cummings. This is the fifth of a series of town halls where we will hear from the Democratic candidates for supervisor for the 3rd and 4th districts. We'll be starting with an introduction from the candidate, followed by questions from the DCC, then the public, and concluding with closing remarks from the candidate. With that, Mr. Cummings, you have the floor.
All right. Well, thank you, Diana, for that introduction, and thank you, everyone, for having me. My name is Justin Cummings. I'm a renter. I'm an environmental scientist with a bachelor's in biology and a PhD in ecology and evolutionary biology with a designated emphasis in environmental studies from UC Santa Cruz. I'm also an educator, a fluent Spanish speaker with a bachelor's in Spanish, member of UAW Local 5810, current Santa Cruz City Council member, and was mayor of Santa Cruz during 2020, one of the most challenging years of our community's recent lived history. This year, as I conclude my term on the Santa Cruz City Council, I'm here to ask for your endorsement and support for the seat of 3rd District County Supervisor. Just to give you a little background about my professional career here in Santa Cruz, I've worked since 2015 to help create the Doris Duke Conservation Scholarship Program at UCSC, whose mission is to increase diversity in the field of environmental conservation. And I've also worked more recently with the UCSC Citrus Initiative for drone education and research in the engineering department, which is another program that's working to increase diversity in the tech fields, specifically around drones. But more about why I'm running for 3rd District Supervisor. We're living through a tremendously difficult time of crisis. During 2020, as mayor, I helped bring opposing community members together to work collaboratively towards solutions to some of our most pressing issues. As we work to develop a sustainable workforce and community, continue to recover from the COVID-19 pandemic, navigate a homelessness crisis, housing crisis, and most importantly, navigating a climate crisis, which has already significantly impacted our community, we need individuals with experience to help us navigate through these different crises. I believe that I'm the candidate that is not only the political and professional experience, but will be a new and diverse voice to the County Board of Supervisors as we tackle these major challenges in our community. As County Supervisor, my priorities will be expediting the rebuilding of homes and businesses from the CZU fires, reducing carbon emissions and confronting the climate crisis, producing truly affordable housing and planning for a sustainable future, supporting local programs to promote justice, diversity, equity, inclusion, and public health, and advancing an economic recovery plan that benefits us all, including small local businesses, working families, and low-wage workers. Up till today, I've been endorsed by many major groups in our community, including the California Nurses Association, Equity Transit, the Monterey-based Central Labor Council, Monterey-based and Santa Cruz Building Construction Trades, SEIU 521, SEIU UHW, Sheet Metal Workers Local 104, and the National Union of Healthcare Workers. And with that, I'd like to end my introduction with the hopes that I'll be able to answer your questions tonight and hopefully earn your endorsement.
Thank you. Okay, so question 1. Santa Cruz County is unique in many ways, such as its topography, people, biodiversity, and mix of cultures. One of the most unique characteristics about Santa Cruz County is that nearly half of the residents of this county live in unincorporated areas. Although you will be representing District 3, your decisions will have a major impact on the residents of other districts. Do you know the important issues also facing Districts 1, 2, 4, and 5? If you can mention the top 1 or 2 issues for each district, that would be great.
Great. So District 1, roads, and I know that there's Dominican Hospital's expansion are big issues. In District 2, there's been concerns around cannabis that I've been hearing throughout the community, along with road infrastructure. In District 4, the community hospital, land use around agriculture, affordable housing production, rail trail. In District 5, rebuilding from the CZU fires and homelessness. And I think, overall, there's some issues around economic recovery from COVID-19 that's impacting all the districts, workforce development, homelessness, water availability, sustainable transportation, and fire protection.
Thank you.
And then did you want me to speak on the third district as well? Sorry.
You may.
Okay. And then in the third district, I would just like to point out that major issues are homelessness, affordable housing, rebuilding from the CZU fires, water rights in Davenport, infrastructure along Highway 1, and the use of beaches, and then rail and trail as well.
Okay, thank you very much. What are the top 3 issues facing this office?
Top 3 issues facing this office. I would say the top issue is infrastructure to support the community that's related to climate change. So infrastructure related to protecting communities against fire, water availability, coastal erosion, affordable housing production, and workforce housing. And lastly, I would say, well, homelessness is a very big issue for the entire community as well.
Okay, thank you. My next couple questions are related to housing, and I'll be asking them in 2 parts. I'll be asking you the first question, hear your response, and then follow up with another question. For the first question, in January of this year, AMBAG voted on the allocation methodology for the 6th cycle of the housing element. The methodology chosen allocated units based on affirmatively furthering fair housing, which is a factor to determine who lacks access to opportunity and address inequities amongst protected class groups. The County of Santa Cruz, not including its cities, received an allocation of 4,634 units. Do you believe that this is a fair and achievable allocation?
I'll just start by saying that, so I've served on AMBAG now for 4 years. And one of the things that was concerning to me was the fact that the Santa Cruz region got disproportionately a higher allocation of housing when compared to the other jurisdictions. And as a representative for the city, we as a city met our numbers, but many of the other jurisdictions throughout the region, throughout the AMBAG region, did not necessarily meet their numbers. And so one of the concerns that I have is that, when that allocation came forward, it was clear that certain jurisdictions who haven't produced their housing were, that Santa Cruz, being a jurisdiction that did produce and has made major strides toward producing its housing, we're getting a higher proportion of housing than when compared to the other regions. And so I believe that, we're going to have to work really hard to meet these goals. And part of what we'll need to do is think about new policies that we can implement. For example, in order to meet the very low and low housing requirements in RENA, one thing that I would like to do is explore increasing the county's inclusionary housing ordinance and percentages from 15 to 20%, so that we can actually produce the affordable housing needed to meet our low and very low goals. I'd also want to work with the housing authority around the Section 8 voucher and our Section 8 programs to see how we can use those programs to help increase the amount of affordable housing that's being produced and that needs to be produced in order to meet those goals. And I think most importantly, I'll advocate at the state level for more resources towards workforce housing and affordable housing. I think one of the biggest issues and challenges that we face with meeting our RENA goals is the fact that we are given, we're allocated a certain number of units that we need to produce, especially as it relates to very low and low affordable housing. We know that producing the market rate units is not an issue aside from having community opposition to certain projects. But what's most difficult to create are these very low and low units. And if the state is going to mandate that we're creating something, they need to provide resources in order for us to be able to meet our goals. And so as county supervisor, I would be pushing strongly, advocating to our state representatives that if we're going to be responsible for creating affordable housing and losing local control over housing production, that they need to provide us with the resources necessary so that we can meet these goals.
Thank you. I kind of already answered this, but I'm going to ask it anyway. My follow-up question is, as of June 2021, The Housing Authority has 12,678 applicant households on the Housing Choice Voucher waitlist. The waitlist is currently closed. Do you stand by your previous response? And is there a creative way to find homes for the many households on this waitlist?
Yes, and I think, so as I mentioned before, I mean, this is a program that receives federal funding. The individuals with these housing vouchers are able to pay, well, the voucher pays for the market rent, and then the government subsidizes the rent for those individuals so that they can live within their means. The fact that we have so many people on this list is just showing that we've been failing to make sure that this program can be implemented in a feasible way. And one of the things I'm committed to is working with the Housing Authority so that we can actually make sure that the people who are waiting on this list for such needed resources are actually able to get into the housing that that is desperately needed for these individuals and their families. I've spoken with developers here in the city of Santa Cruz to see how we can help increase the amount of Section 8 housing that's in new developments. And one thing that I would be trying to push for is that we're building more 100% Section 8 housing within our communities. Many people have expressed across many neighborhoods in the city, and I've heard people in parts of the county say that they're pro affordable housing. And so I think that we need to come up with ways and try to figure out how we can make these kinds of programs more effective and function so that we can get these numbers of people on our list down, and and the wait times for when voucher holders receive their voucher to when they get in the housing we can reduce that timeline to make this program more effective.
Thank you. Okay, question 4. Do you support the Greenway Initiative? Why or why not? And please respond from both a district-specific and county-wide perspective.
Great. And I just want to state too that I think that I didn't bring this up when I was talking about each of the districts, but this is definitely an important issue to every single district within the county. I do not support Greenway. I support keeping the rail and the trail. That has been my position since 2018, and that position has never changed. I believe that as someone who works in environmental science, someone who is trying to push so that we can minimize our carbon footprint and address issues related to climate change, that we have to keep every option available possible in terms of trying to support sustainable mass transit within our region. When the Costa Futura train came, it demonstrated that we could provide a lighter weight, environmentally friendly option for mass transit in our community. And we've spent millions of dollars acquiring the rail, building trail that currently exists in our community next to the rail, and ripping the tracks out now would not only cost millions and millions of dollars, but we would never see the rail come back again in our community. This notion of rail banking, I think, is a false narrative, especially when we know that we need to try to figure out ways to invest in rail now so that we can have this for future generations. It's not going to be easy, and it's definitely going to take time. But one thing that we see is that when there's a political will to make things happen, we can find funding. This year, we see an infrastructure bill at the federal level that we haven't seen in close to half a decade. We also have a budget surplus here in the state of California, and there's been talk of Gavin Newsom providing more funding towards infrastructure. And if we were able to move forward with the business plan and move forward with trying to demonstrate that we can make rail work in our community, we would likely be able to have access to these funds that are available for us to bring in a sustainable, clean form of mass transit in our community. I also know that other regions are trying to expand on rail, for example, in Monterey. And as on AMBAG, there's been discussion of our Metropolitan Transit Plan. And this will be a great project that could be included in that, so long as we continue to move forward. As I mentioned before, we've spent millions and millions of dollars acquiring this rail. And I think that now what we need to do is continue moving forward, figure out what the hurdles are, try to advocate for funding so that we can overcome those hurdles, and then work with the community to figure out what are the complications and what are the concerns so that we can mitigate those as well, and bring forward a sustainable rail and trail for our community.
Thank you. We will now move on to questions from the public. So if you have a question, please raise your hand and we will acknowledge you, or you can also put it down in the chat. All right, Miss Ackerman. And you're on mute.
All right, sorry about that. Okay, I have two questions. I wear two different hats. My first question is around, well, the eviction moratorium that the state of California had in place, that eviction moratorium is about to expire on March 31st. Now, this probably isn't going to be an issue by the time we're actually voting in November, but this is an issue right now. I work for Community Bridges with Ray Cancino, and we have a number of clients who are already being impacted. They're already receiving eviction notices. So one request that I would make as we go forward here in the next couple of months is that the candidates for office think about making statements supporting an extension of the eviction delay from 3 days to 15 days to give people more time to potentially get that payment from the state of California, because we have hundreds of families that are still in the pipeline waiting for that money, and they're going to lose their homes here in the next few weeks. And that money is still going to go to their landlords, even though they don't have homes to live in anymore. So that's just my request to all candidates to be thinking about the impacts in the short term for that, and what we can do, of course, long term to address that, because this is a condition that's not going to go away. So sorry, that's sort of a statement, not a question, but if you wanted to speak on that, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
No, that's actually, I'm glad you brought that up, because that item's on our agenda tomorrow. And I've been reaching out to the city attorney about this, because, it's really not fair that the state has implemented this program to help keep people in their homes. People are going through the motions of applying for these funds. And because the system is not set up properly to get the funds distributed, many of these people are going to be risking being evicted from their homes. I'm trying to work to see how we can put some kind of rental or eviction protection in place. I know that there's language that's written that suggests that it might not be legally feasible, but I think that this is a circumstance where, if we're trying to say as a community that we want to keep people from going homeless, we want to keep people in their homes, we continue to say that we're all in this together. This is an example of how we need to stand up, and we need to, try to put something in place to protect our tenants and people who are facing evictions now, and also, advocate and write letters to our federal or our state representatives to say, hey, these programs, we have hundreds of people who are still waiting. They're eligible for these funds. We need more time for them to get these funds so they can stay in their homes. And so I'm going to be proposing to do something along those lines tomorrow at the city council meeting. And I hope I get the support of my colleagues so we don't have more people getting evicted and potentially facing homelessness in our community.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. Thank you. And if I could be indulged for one more question, in a separate hat, I'm also a member of the San Lorenzo Valley Water District Board and the Santa Margarita Groundwater Agency Board of Directors. And in that capacity, we are beginning now to grapple with what the long-term future of our groundwater management looks like. And there are very expensive ways to protect our groundwater going forward and restore the aquifer. And there are less expensive ways. And I'm curious, as a county supervisor, one, what your thoughts are around the approaches that are being proposed right now, and what you think the county's responsibility should be in helping to identify funding, frankly, for districts like ours here in the San Lorenzo Valley that are really still struggling with extremely high costs for fire recovery and rebuilding, and trying to set aside additional funding to fund a brand new agency. We agree this is incredibly important, but our ratepayers are being pressed from all sides. So we're eager for support from the county. And I'd love to hear your thoughts around that as well.
That's a great question. And I think that, the reason why I prioritize climate change and really trying to think about a plan for the future is that we're facing these impacts now, and we really need to be proactive at how are we going to, be able to provide water for people moving forward. what are some new and innovative ways that we can do that? And, there has been work that's underway here in the city of Santa Cruz around groundwater recharge and using and tertiary treatment of water. And I think that, that since desal was opposed in the past, that is one way that we can continue moving forward to help address water issues and making sure that our water table is maintained. And I think that, we're living in a time now where we also have, and I think during the time I'll be on, if I was elected to the 3rd District Board of Supervisors, where we have a federal government that really understands that climate change is a pressing issue and that we need to invest in our infrastructure around climate. And so I would be a strong advocate for trying to get funds, but also work with the community to determine what seems like the most feasible way that we can move forward with supporting infrastructure around groundwater recharge. In addition to that, I know in other parts of the county, saltwater intrusion is becoming a big issue. And so working on how we can prevent that from occurring as well. And then in addition to that, as we think about the impacts that we're going to be seeing from fires, like how can we come up with, one, how can we expedite people's ability to rebuild more quickly? And then in addition to that, how can we look at maintaining and creating defensible space around, not only around people's homes, but in the natural environment, so that people can also help and do their part in managing vegetation in such a way that we're promoting practices that are environmentally sustainable. And that will require not only that we're working with community members, but we're also working with scientists at UCSC, experts in the field, people from our indigenous communities who bring indigenous knowledge. I think that oftentimes, as someone who works at the university, it's an undertapped resource when we're trying to think of new ways to protect our communities and our environment. And I see this as a really good opportunity for us to figure out, how we can invest in protecting resources for future generations. And yeah, I'd be a strong advocate for working with the community on how we can do so.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for your question, Ms. Ackerman. I'm going to move on to a question from the chat from Ms. Hockman. Who are your top 3 individual contributors?
So my top 3 individual, I'll just say right now that since I've secured the endorsements of many of the unions, I've received contributions from, I'd say my top 3 contributors. I can't say them off the top of my head, but they definitely are unions, because I was able to get $1,000 contribution from a number of the unions. So those are my top contributors at the moment. I'd say, yeah, it's mostly unions. And then in addition to that, I'd have to look back at my financial report, but I believe I've received $500 contributions from people like Fred Keeley, from Gary Patton, from a number of people who are leaders in our community. And I'd say overwhelmingly, though, my contributions have been coming from working class people. So people who are teachers, they're educators at the university, scientists, people who work in service industry. So my contributions are largely diverse in terms of who they come from. I haven't taken any contributions from folks who are supporting Greenway. And yeah, that's what I can say towards, who are my top 3 contributors. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hockman, for the question. Mr. Sonnenfeld, you may ask your question.
Thank you. Good evening, council member. In 2018, the state of California followed in the footsteps of the Obama administration by passing laws to affirmatively further fair housing. Affirmatively furthering fair housing means taking meaningful actions in addition to combating discrimination that overcome patterns of segregation and foster inclusive communities free from barriers that restrict access to opportunity based on protected characteristics. Specifically, affirmatively furthering fair housing means taking meaningful actions that, when taken together, address significant disparities in housing needs and access to opportunity, replacing segregated living patterns with truly integrated and balanced living patterns, and transforming racially and ethnically concentrated areas of poverty into areas of opportunity, and fostering and maintaining compliance with civil rights and fair housing laws. We will be required to affirmatively further fair housing when we implement our housing element, starting in the 6th cycle in 2013. And I'm curious what your approach to affirmatively further fair housing in the unincorporated part of the county will be, even if it means changing the character of our neighborhoods to have more diverse, inclusive opportunities for apartments and low-income housing in our most affluent neighborhoods.
Okay, that was a big one. But I think if I can capture that, what would I do to further fair housing, especially in unincorporated areas? And I think that, this is something I've touched on a bunch today during this conversation, which is, I'd really like to work with the Housing Authority to see how we can expand and build more Section 8 housing, how we can get more Section 8 housing vouchers into developments that are moving forward. I think we need to be mindful about where we're putting market rate housing, because one thing that we've seen is that over time, with the increase in housing costs and housing prices, we've seen more people of color be disproportionately displaced and pushed out of the county. So I think that as we're trying to figure out how we're going to meet our RENA goals and how we're going to develop within the county, that we are being mindful about who is being displaced and by what kinds of housing is being produced. And so I think that, when we're moving forward with building housing, I'm firmly of the mindset that not every housing is good housing, that we have to build a housing that's going to meet the needs of our community, that's going to prevent gentrification. And so I think we're going to need to have we're going to have to pay close attention to what kinds of projects are moving forward. I think also we're going to need to look at, what opportunities there are to produce workforce housing, because we do know that many people in our workforce aren't falling into those very low and low needed housing categories. And without these people who are really needed in our workforce, that we won't be able to sustain our community as a whole. So I'm willing to come up to work on creative solutions with our community to try to see how we can maximize housing that meets the needs of our community and doesn't displace or gentrify our community as a whole.
Thank you. Any other questions from the public? Mr. Russomanno, you have the floor.
Justin, why do you want this job?
That is a great question. Having served on the city council now for 4 years, this will be the end of my 4th year, and having served in the role of mayor during a really difficult time, I really found that I have the opportunity to work with people to bring them together around really difficult and challenging issues. I'm a person who, instead of running from challenges, I like to run towards them. And, I think that one thing we saw after 2020 was there was a lot of people who got out of politics, and it was because it was such a challenging year. And for me, I felt like I was able to actually make a difference in the community during that time. And I felt like I wanted to keep doing that moving forward. One thing that I think has been really important to me is that, and what's driven me to do this job as well, is that, we've heard for I've been hearing for decades, probably ever since I got into college and decided to become a biologist, that we need more scientists in politics. We need more scientists who are able to help make decisions so we can mitigate our impacts on climate change. And, having heard that call and kind of seen what's been done over time, we've never had, for example, an environmental scientist on the county board of supervisors. And oftentimes science, as much as we say we want to incorporate it, oftentimes, well, not often, but sometimes it's overlooked in the interest of business. And I think that we really need, and 2020 was one of those years where we saw throughout our country that in areas where we really followed the science of trying to keep our communities safe from COVID-19, we had lower deaths. And in areas where people dismissed the science, we saw more people dying, more infections, and we continue to see the impacts of that to this day as we continue to make our way through the pandemic. And I'd say in addition to that, you know, as a young professional who's about to turn 40 at you know, next year, you know, it's extremely difficult for me to live here. Someone who has worked for the university, who has a PhD, who's helped to run and create numerous nonprofits trying to uplift people of color and people who've been underrepresented in certain fields. I can barely afford to live here. And I know many people in my position, and I feel that many of us have not been heard. And I feel like it's time that we have a voice for people who, you know, really are essential workers in our community, and yet at the same time feel like our local government isn't doing what it needs to make sure that they can stay in our community. And so, you know, those are the reasons that I feel like I want to continue doing this work. And I feel like my background would be very useful as we continue moving forward, working together as a community to really address not only the challenges we're facing right now, but starting to think about how we're going to create a sustainable community for the next generation.
Thank you, Mr. Rustamano. Any additional questions for Mr. Cummings? Seeing none. Mr. Cummings, you have 2 minutes for your closing remarks.
All right. Well, that question, I think I got a lot of my closing remarks out, but I will say that first, I'd like to thank you all for having me this evening, and want to thank you all for your support over the years that I've been on City Council. I've held numerous leadership positions on various committees and commissions, and I feel that I've been effective at bringing people from opposing views together to work towards our common goals. As County Supervisor, I will continue to reach out to all members of our community to work past our differences, provide accurate information to our community members, try to reach consensus, and create a path forward that reflects positive changes that we want to see in our community. This will require that we're coming up with new and innovative solutions as we address issues around homelessness, housing, sustainable transportation, criminal justice and public safety reform, rebuilding after the CZU fire complex. But most importantly, we'll need to work together to come up with climate solutions to support a sustainable community for future generations. I've had the opportunity to work with city, county, state, federally elected leaders, and most importantly, you, the community, as a council member, vice mayor, and mayor of Santa Cruz during 2020, one of the most challenging years in the recent history of our community. If elected, I would be able to give voice for people who have historically been excluded, given that I would be the first African-American, first renter, and first environmental scientist to sit on the 3rd District Board of Supervisors. I share your vision for Santa Cruz being a place where people from all backgrounds can live peacefully and thrive. And it's this love for this community that inspires and drives me to serve as your 3rd District County Supervisor, should you choose to elect me. I want to thank you for your time, and I hope I can count on your endorsement and support, and have a good evening.
Thank you, Mr. Cummings, for giving us your time this evening, and we will hold our final town hall at 7 p.m. tonight with District 4 candidate Jimmy Dutra. Thank you for joining us this evening. My name is Diana Alfaro, events co-chair of the Democratic Central Committee, and I'll be moderating tonight's discussion, town hall, with District 4 Supervisor candidate Jimmy Dutra. This is the last of a series of town halls where we will hear from Democratic candidates for Supervisor for the 3rd and 4th districts. We'll be starting with an introduction from the candidate, followed by questions from the DCC, then the public, and concluding with closing remarks from the candidate. With that, Mr. Dutra, you have the floor.
Hi, good evening, everybody. My name is Jimmy Dutra. For those of you that don't know me, I was born and raised in Watsonville. I'm 3rd generation. I attended Santa Clara University for my undergraduate, and I got my master's in leadership at USC. I came back to Watsonville after going off and living life for a little bit outside of Santa Cruz County, and I came back and I opened a small business here in Watsonville. It was called Jimmy's Pumpkins. So I had a pumpkin patch, which I had school children come to all the time for many years. It's no longer open for numerous reasons. But so at that point, when I came back, I noticed a community that just was not, it was stagnant. It was left in the same place of when I left. So I wanted to do something about that. I decided to run for office, and not knowing very much about how this works and the politics within politics. And I just said, hey, I'm going to run. And I decided to run for county supervisor. I did not win, but I did very well. One of the things that people wanted me to do was to get more experience. And so what I did was I immediately ran for city council, and I unseated a incumbent. And I sat on the city council for 4 years. At that time, 4 years later, we accomplished a lot in those 4 years. I became the first openly gay city council member elected to the city of Watsonville. And during that time, not only did I do things to, really push our community forward, like get funding for the first LGBTQ nonprofit, which was the Diversity Center that the city had ever donated to. I also worked to make sure that language in our contracts included, the LGBTQ community, and that, a lot of our policies were being inclusive. At that, we also worked on, I helped build a couple parks in my district. I was just a real boots on the ground, running, making sure things were getting done. I decided to run again in 2014 for supervisor. I made it to the top two. Greg was the only one that beat me, and there were 5 of us running in June. Greg and I moved forward into the runoff. What I got a lot from people were, oh, we feel so loyal to Greg, and a lot of people who live in our adult village just felt really committed to him. But we had a strong showing, and we did very well. I then, but by November, I did not win that race. So I also had given up my seat on the city council, so I was out. But I may not have been on the city council, but I stayed very active within the community. 2 years later, I ran again for city council, and I came on as mayor. I was the first openly gay mayor for the city of Watsonville. And since then, we've been working hard to continue to bring diversity into our community. Under my mayorship, we raised the pride flag to over our city, which will be flying every June, as well as working with other jurisdictions like our Pajaro Valley Unified School District, as well as the city of Capitola, who also now fly the pride flag. So this is because of the hard work that I help make happen throughout our county. So we have one city left, Scotts Valley. I hope that that their council will one day decide to fly it, because I believe every jurisdiction in our county deserves that. As mayor, I came on during one of the most difficult times, not only in my lifetime, but probably in the last 100 years, probably since the Spanish flu, dealing with a pandemic. And our community was hit disproportionately. We had more deaths and more infection rate than any other part of the county. When the vaccine started coming out, the vaccine was staying to the north. It was at Sutter. And I'm sure most of you know me, I'm a very big voice, and I stand up for what I believe in. I worked hard to get the vaccine down with our city to South County. One of my first actions was also to contact the governor's office and my state legislature to have our farm workers prioritized, since they were out harvesting our fields every single day to make sure that food was on our tables, so that a lot of us that could work from home, like myself, being a teacher, had the luxury of being home. I wanted to make sure that those that didn't were able to get the vaccine. So we worked hard with that, working with our federal and state government to bring in millions of dollars to that will be renovating our Ramsey Park and our plaza. We also just our medians. We've been working really hard in the city to get funding to areas that have been touched or addressed in many, many years. So it was nice to see that. I also worked with our Portuguese community. I heard you guys talking about Portuguese earlier. And we have a sister city in Veles, São Jorge in Portugal. And that happened while I was mayor, and I worked with the committee actually to make that happen. I worked with our parks and community services to raise thousands of dollars to bring holiday lights downtown that are now lighting our poles during the holidays. This was something that when I was a child, I remembered, specifically how it made me feel when I was a kid driving down and seeing how beautiful our downtown was. And I wanted that to happen. So I follow through, I get things done, and I know the community sees that. And that's why in my last election, when, a lot of the political groups did not support me, my race, I won handedly. So I think actions speak louder than words, and that the people in our community saw that. So I am now working hard again to become the supervisor. People know my work ethic, and I promise to continue to take that to the Board of Supervisors to make sure that our voices will be heard on issues that are important to us here in South County. So thank you for having me here this evening, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you so much. Moving on to our questions. Santa Cruz County is unique in many ways, such as its topography, people, biodiversity, and mix of cultures. One of the most unique characteristics about Santa Cruz County is that nearly half of the residents of this county live in unincorporated areas. Although you will be representing District 4, your decisions will have a major impact on the residents of other districts. Do you know the important issues also facing Districts 1, 2, 3, and 5? If you can mention the top one or two issues for each district, that would be great.
Thank you for the question. Yeah, I think some of the issues that the districts are facing, we're all facing, and some just have it a little bit, they're facing it a little bit more, having difficult times than we are in certain other districts. So like for instance, in District 3, homelessness is really big. I mean, you go to Santa Cruz and you see there is really an issue that needs to be addressed in some sort of manner. So that for me is a big issue. I would say is going to be facing that Board of Supervisors who's going to be elected there. So we're facing it down in South County as well, but not at the degree that we do see it in that district. I would say also in District 1, I've been reading a lot in the paper about the Kaiser is going in, and sounds like some of the residents around it kind of are concerned about traffic or other issues. So I think that the Kaiser is going to be a big issue for District 1. And District 5, the CZU fire recovery, that's something that they are, I'm sure, still going to be, handling for many years. And so I know that we have residents that have moved here to Watsonville because of that. And, I think that that's going to be something that's facing their district as well. District 2, very similar to ours, because a lot of people don't realize that District 2 comes down into Watsonville. It actually encompasses all of District 3 of our city council and parts of District 4. So when people down here, they don't even know, because sometimes they, they think they only have one representative, but in the reality they have two, and it has a lot of rural roads and a lot of farmland. So I would say that there, probably a lot of concerns. I've spoken to people in Corlitos and other areas that, the first thing out of there that they speak about are the roads and the condition of the infrastructure that they have. So, even though we're a very small county, I believe we're the second smallest in the state, we, we have a lot of issues, and sometimes they kind of overlap each other, but yeah, but some are more specific to other certain places than others.
Thank you. What are the top 3 issues facing this office?
For the District 4, for me, from what I see homelessness rising. It's a big issue, and one that we've been faced with here in Watsonville recently, when we just had an encampment pop up, and we shut the encampment down, and we've been sued by the homeless union. But this is we follow all the rules and the direction that's given to us by the state. So I think that this is going to be a challenge for us, because I think that locations are being sought out, and people are testing how jurisdictions are going to be handling them. I also think housing is going to be an issue. One of the things I would love to work with is our farmers to create farm worker housing. We see that happening in Monterey County. This is something that I've ran on last time. I want to run on again this time, is to see if we can build farm worker housing for our farm workers. And our infrastructure, our roads, they're failing. And when I say infrastructure, it's not just our roads, which are terrible, but it's also the fact that our broadband, we don't have broadband for everybody down here, and our students have lost 2 years of their lives because they weren't able to access the internet. And I just look at some of the other issues we're fighting about in this county, and people don't even realize that. I mean, I'm a teacher, I'm in the schools, I see the kids, and we are 2 years behind because they had no access, many of them. So yeah, we have a lot of issues down here, and crime is on the way up. We've had several murders in the last, or people found dead in the last couple of weeks. So I think that we have a lot of issues, and this is a time that this position needs somebody who has the experience to handle them. So
Okay. My next couple questions are related to housing, and I will be asking them in two parts. I'll be asking you the first question, hear your response, and then follow up with another question. For the first question, in January of this year, AMBAG voted on the allocation methodology for the 6th cycle of the housing element. The methodology chosen allocated units based on affirmatively furthering fair housing, which is a factor to determine who lacks access to opportunity and address inequities amongst protected class groups. The County of Santa Cruz, not including its cities, received an allocation of 4,634 units. Do you believe that this is a fair and achievable allocation?
do I think it's fair? No. I mean, the number is really high. We have a hard time even achieving the numbers that we do have. So, and a lot of times, I feel that South County has to pick up those numbers. And to have that kind of a number, I worry that people are going to be really trying to push all the build throughout. That's going to be needed throughout the county down to Watsonville and South County. So I don't think that number is fair, and it's not realistic. And but I think that it needs to be, equally equitably, put throughout the entire county. Everyone has to have their fair share of building, and trust me, I'll be a big voice on that to make sure that happens. People may not like me about that, but people down here in South County, a lot of times we feel that we kind of get taken advantage, and that's not going to happen anymore.
My follow-up question is, as of June 2021, the Housing Authority has 12,678 applicant households on the Housing Choice Voucher waitlist. The waitlist is currently closed. Do you stand by your previous response? And is there a creative way to find homes for the many households on this waitlist?
Yeah. So that's interesting, because the waitlist is from people throughout the county. And so when you build, say we build in Watsonville, it's not guaranteed for South County residents. And even though we may have the highest need, or I feel that we do, it's not, that housing is not guaranteed for our residents. So we're housing the entire county. So again, we need to make sure that housing is built throughout the county, so that when this list can, come down in numbers, we can be placing people into housing. So, I agree. As long as it's sustainable, I know that I haven't voted for every single affordable housing or even market housing. I look at everything, to a T, and make sure that it's going to work out and that we're not going to get sued over it, or housing is not built on contaminated soil, which one of our projects was, which is actually stalled. I'm really thoughtful when I go through this process. So I know that it sounds good just to let's vote to, put out all kinds of housing without, really thinking about where we're actually putting people. And I think that's important too. So I want to make sure that that is going to be addressed. And I support market rate housing as well. There are too many people who do not qualify for affordable housing, and they're being pushed out of our community. And when I knock on doors, for the many races that I've been a part of, I've heard parents and also people saying, I can't afford to live here. I don't qualify for affordable housing, and and so therefore I'm being pushed out of my own city. So I want to make sure that there's going to be housing for those people that were, that have been part of this community for decades.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Question 4. Do you support the Greenway Initiative? Why or why not? Please respond from both a district-specific and countywide perspective.
Right. So I'm from the point of let the people vote. I know people in North County hate this answer, but to be quite honest with you, people in South County, no one brings it up and talks about it. There's a couple people who have been the face to it, but outside of that, this is not an issue facing us. So I think that the people need to decide whether or not this is something that they want to decide. It is, Tony, come down to Watsonville. I mean, I don't see you down here very much, but I think that you come down to Watsonville, we have bigger issues. And so I think that it needs to go to the people to vote, and they need to be the ones to make the final decision. And this is going to be costly. For Metro, we already taxed ourselves twice. One, I believe, in 1978 for a half-cent tax, and then again in 2016 with Measure D. And I sit on the Metro board. We're facing a fiscal cliff, and it doesn't help when the RTC is taking away funding from us as well. So I know what the situation we're in right now. So if the people decide, let's go out and raise the money to have the train, and we want to go with it, I'm going to support it. Whatever the people want, I'm going to support, because that's what they want. So
Thank you.
Mhm.
We will now move on to questions from those in attendance. And folks, you may raise your hand to be acknowledged, or you can also put the question in the chat. And we have a question from Ms. Hockman in the chat. What's your position on Measure U, the extension of the urban growth boundary?
Right. So that's an interesting one, right? Because you have one side saying, no growth at all, and let's preserve our ag land, which 20 years ago, when they brought that to us, that's what the question was, and it passed easily. And then you have another side saying, well, but we need housing, right? So we need to expand onto farmland, and we need to, make sure that we are able to build housing. So it's a really difficult situation. I support, making sure that our ag land is preserved, but I do think there are situations where we can work to build housing and annex in small pieces of land that are not considered prime ag land, because there are pieces, I come from a farming family, that are not considered prime. So I've had this conversation with them to have this there was no this measure. There wasn't any collaboration between the city and the people who proposed the Measure U. So 20 years ago, everybody was at the table 20 years ago, but I think we live in a time now where people are just kind of going on in their own way and not really bringing everyone to the table. So yeah, I think you could have both. And I think, so what happened at our last city council meeting was we pushed it out and said, listen, both sides need to sit down and talk to each other. Hopefully you can come to an agreement where we can work out where we can do growth for housing. And also, I'm a big proponent. I want the Redmond property would be great revenue tax for the city. And that's something I've been very vocal about, is that piece needs to be annexed into the city. It seems like they're willing to have this conversation. So between now and November, let's see what happens. I feel like I'm the only one in between both sides being able to talk to both sides, and I'm trying to bring them together to have this conversation. So
Yeah,
because we
just,
really do-
just as a follow-up, I asked that question about Measure U. My name is Nora Hockman.
uh-huh.
What's your
Uh-huh.
position on the measure as it's been submitted to the voters? Are you for it or are you against it? It's that kind of a measure.
Yeah, I understand. Well, hopefully it could be before, it hasn't been submitted yet, so it's going to November. So once it's submitted, I'll let you know.
So you don't have a position is what you're saying.
This it's not written yet. It's been pushed off till November. There's a chance for it to change, Nora.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay,
And hopefully it
thank
will.
you. Thank you, Ms. Hockman. Ms. Steiner. And you are on mute.
Hi, Jimmy. It's Leslie Steiner. It's nice to see you. It's been a while. I am,
Hi, Leslie.
I am extraordinarily confused about your position on housing in Watsonville.
Uh-huh.
I'm hearing you tonight talk about a homeless situation, a removal of a camp, no place to go with these people. I'm hearing you tonight admit to the fact that there is a housing shortage. And yet in an article in February of this year in the Good Times, it tells us that you voted against 4 affordable housing projects. Not only that, you went into your neighborhood, polled your neighbors, went into another neighborhood where one of these housing projects could have been developed and polled those neighbors. Your response is to have the farmers build housing. Jimmy, I am seeing racism here at its worst, and I need to have an answer to this. You're going into white neighborhoods. You're polling these people and saying, oh, we don't want you here. Can you please explain this position to me? Thank you.
Well, I think that's funny. I mean, Watsonville is 85% Latino, but I guess these are all specific white neighborhoods. That's not true. And that's not true about 4 affordable housing. Actually, 2 were market rate and 2 were affordable. The first market rate housing that I voted against is on contaminated soil. It's actually stalled at the county. And I'm telling you, I vote on things, but not off face value. So that was the first one. The second one was another market rate housing that on Airport Boulevard, because the pilots threatened to sue, and I did not want to put our city through another lawsuit. So I wanted to make sure that we can work on trying to get that situated before we got ourselves in a lawsuit. Well, guess what? We're in a lawsuit. And one of the other projects was a county project, which was pushed into our city. The county kept the RENA numbers, which I didn't think was fair. They also, the fact that these projects do not get to do a traffic plan or an EIR, or and because they're affordable, but yet we found out because of the market rate housing that land was contaminated, that we're possibly putting it on land that we don't know how it is underneath. So I think that plus our roads and our infrastructure was not being addressed. These are small roads. That specific one was going to have 350 new units on it. Cars travel per day on it. That's a lot. So unless lighting gets put in and sidewalks, I think it's nice to put in the housing. We do need it, but I think we also need to work to make sure that it's going to be the package is not just like, oh, here's housing and we're just going to slap it in. We're going to keep the RENA numbers at the county, but we're going to make you annex it in and use your services. So I really am thoughtful with my decisions and I stand by them.
Thank you. Acknowledging Mr. Sonnenfeld, please ask your question.
Hi, council member. Sorry, I have another question about housing for you. According to a 2018 study commissioned by California Institute for Rural Studies, over 30,000 new homes are needed for farm workers in the Salinas and Pajaro valleys. The study indicates an overwhelming need for affordable, permanent, year-round family housing to help reduce overcrowding, and specifically a need for at least 4,000 subsidized affordable homes for farm workers. One affordable housing development built in the last 5 years received over 2,500 applications to live there. Where should these homes for farm workers be built in the county?
Right, and that's a good question. Earlier, I was just talking about we need to work with the farmers to build farm worker housing on their properties. So that's something that we need to do. They're doing it in Monterey County right now. There's no traction for it here, and I'd like to create that traction so that we can get that done. So I agree, absolutely, we need to do that.
Okay, thank you. So we kind of have the same question twice here from both Jamin Ackman. I hope I'm saying your name properly because I realized I said it wrong last time. And Mr. Rusamano. Ms. Ackman said, we want to vote on a candidate knowing their policy position on the rail question. I don't want to wait for the candidate to decide until after the voters do. And Mr. Rusamano followed up by saying, Measure D is written. So.
Yeah, well, I respect you guys, and I probably won't get this endorsement, and it's fine. I just, I will be out here making sure that I'm working for the District 4 and the issues that are important to us. I know the rail is really important to you guys, but we have big issues where our kids weren't even getting broadband. We're dealing with homelessness, and we're dealing with issues that need to be addressed. So if the train is the only thing you care about, and not the fact that we pushed LGBT rights down here and had, funding to organizations. My moral compass, I know what it is. So if the train is your guys, that is fine. But we have major issues down here. So, well, Tony, I told you, my position is let the people vote if this is a democracy. So.
Okay. Ms. Ackman, please ask your question.
Sure. I just wanted to follow up on that. You have talked about some of your views on the county's housing equity policies and how you feel, I'm characterizing here, so feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but how you feel that they disproportionately impact Watsonville. Transportation is also a social justice issue. And when you have the majority of low income and affordable housing being built in one part of the county, that you are then not addressing the traffic congestion and commute impacts by failing to do improvement projects that allow those commuters access to schools like UC Santa Cruz and jobs like those that are in Santa Cruz or around the bend and over on the other side of the hill, you are creating another economic issue in your own community. So I guess I just want to encourage you to think more carefully about your policy positions on traffic congestion issues and the long-term impacts of failing to invest in infrastructure and how those things will impact your own community. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I do. I mean, I sit on the Metro board, right? So we do have buses. I was a big proponent of getting them to be electric. I've gone to DC, worked with our Congress and our Department of Transportation to try to build a really strong bus system. Unfortunately, because of our cuts, we've had to cut routes, which is also an economic issue for a community of color when you're cutting our routes. And so I think that I've been endorsed by Metro. They see how hard I work to try to get our systems working. It's hard, and I understand. People do depend on public transportation. Unfortunately, we've lost a lot of ridership over the years. And so I'm looking forward to bus on shoulder. And, hopefully that's going to be something that will be very positive. And if the people want a rail, then they're going to put it in. I support it. Let's see people have a voice. If people in South County, you can't discredit it. We'll see what they decide at the end of the day. But that's, if they feel this is the route they want to go, then that's the route we're going to go. We would have to increase funding at Metro. I don't know where we would get it though.
So you're for bus on shoulder, but not for increasing the funding to allow you to operate bus on shoulder?
Well, we get funding through Metro, so that's a different organization. And, we get the funding, then we're going to put bus on shoulder if that's what the voters want,
You're a member of the board. You can decide how the funding gets allocated at Metro.
Absolutely, but we don't have that much funding to do a project like that by ourselves. I don't know where people think money falls out of trees. I don't get it, but we don't have that kind of funding to put bus lanes on the side. We have to go out for grant funding, and it just does not happen all the time. And as you can see, this would have been nice to have been part of the Measure D back in 2016 package, but it wasn't.
Thank you. Any other questions from the public? Okay, Mr. Goldenkrantz.
Thanks, and thanks for coming, Jimmy. Appreciate you taking the time.
Absolutely.
So one of the COVID relief packages from the feds that the state cooperated with was protection for evictions of tenants due to COVID, right? And in Santa Cruz County, over 3,000 families applied for that relief. Only about 12 or 1,300 have gotten that. So the dilemma, what we're worried about, is that on March 31st, when the program expires, there may be a mass move towards evictions. So we have two proposals that are going to cities and the county. One would be to extend the moratorium. We know that other cities and counties in the state have done that. And the second would be to provide for sort of an order that any evictions that get processed would have to go into mediation, and then providing funding for that mediation to happen. So I'm wondering, either with your city hat on or with potentially a county hat on, what are your thoughts? How could you help avoid this kind of disaster?
Right, absolutely. That's going to be possibly a big issue. When it comes up, it's if the governor's not going to continue with it. It sounds like, and it doesn't sound like the county is going to be. We will be on board with the governor's decision as well. And so what we're doing in the city is we're making sure that in anticipation of this, that we're going to have funding through a certain grant to help with those people that are in need. So they're going to apply for funding. I think we have about $300,000 that's going to be available, and this will help people with their rent to help get them through these times, because we do see this coming. So we're already getting ready for it. So I think at the county, we would need to do the same thing, have certain funding pots that we can help out people with.
Yeah, thank you. So if I can just follow real quick. So you're right. I think sort of that the county went along with the state program. The state program is expiring, and yet somehow there's this implication that cities in the county are still bound by the terms of the agreement, even though it's expired. So this idea that it's not within a local government's jurisdiction
Can you
to
go back
extend that
to the Pajaro Valley Group?
is
You're not on mute.
we're getting conflicting legal opinions on this one. So can you just expand a little bit on that?
From what I understand is that we cannot make a decision on an area where the state has already done so. So that puts us at a legal risk. So since the state has already made a decision on this, we cannot make a decision. We cannot then go on our own and make another decision. Does that make sense? The cities don't have any authority to enact this.
So yeah. So but several cities and counties have done so without lawsuits. And I guess the question, I'm not a lawyer, so I'm a civilian, is if the program expires on March 31st, how is it that if what you seem to be saying, or the advice you're getting from city attorney, is that some parts of the protections expire, but the legal obligations do not expire? Is that kind of it? Because it feels like there's a piece of this that we're not, and it's not. I'm not saying you're not telling us the truth. I'm saying there's a piece of this that's really confusing.
Yeah, Andrew, I think that there's a lot of confusion around it, and I think jurisdictions are waiting until the March 31st to see if there are going to be these lawsuits, and I think maybe they'll be braver at that point to take a stance on it. But I think people are just afraid of being sued, and For the current law says if the state has acted on it, that, cities cannot. So, and they acted on it. But the good news is for like the city of Watsonville, we have funding. So I think we've, since February of this month, of this year, since February, we've assisted 12 families. So, and so, yeah, and I think that we only have 4 that are behind on their rent. So it's, the help is there.
Okay, the work continues. Thank you.
Yeah. So, but we'll let you know. I think after March 31st, we're gonna have more news about it.
Okay, thank you. Any final questions for the candidate? Seeing none. Mr. Dutra, you now have 2 minutes for closing remarks.
Thank you. Thank you for having me come and speak this evening. I know we all don't see eye to eye on, some issues, or, we're different people, and I respect you all, for what you do in our community, and, being the activists and making sure that, our voices are being heard on different issues. That's how policies change. And I appreciate that. Sometimes, when you're put in these positions, you have to make tough decisions and you have to balance everything. And there are a lot of times that I would like to, support something, but when I look, fully into it, there are issues that, overwhelm it, that I, ultimately don't. So, as we move forward, I'm going to continue to work hard for our community down here. I've been a big voice. I know they're not used to having that in that seat. And but when I talk to people down here, we feel forgotten. And kind of having this rail conversation makes me kind of sad about it, because I think that the issue, a lot of the issues that we're facing down here are really paramount. I mean, they're really serious issues. And I will continue to fight for the people of District 4 and be the voice that, they have not had in a very long time. So thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, Mr. Dutra, for giving us your time tonight. On Wednesday, we will hold our candidate forum, where we will hear from the candidates one final time before the members of the DCC make their vote. You can continue listening to this town hall and share these town halls with your friends. All of our town halls have been recorded for folks to view prior to the election, and you can find them on the Santa Cruz Democrats YouTube page, which the link has been dropped below. So thank you all, and have a good night, and see most of you on Wednesday.